Shabbat Shalom. Towards the end of this week's Torah portion, we're told explicitly about the uniqueness of Moses. To be sure, throughout the Torah, when Moses is involved as the leader of the children of Israel, there are subtle hints as to Moses' uniqueness. Sometimes the text tells us outright what it is that makes Moses so wonderful. The text tells us that Moses had an audience with God, panim el panim, in a way, face to face, that no other human being or living creature would have with God. This week, at the end of this week's Torah portion, we get another message or idea given to us as to Moses' uniqueness. It begins with his siblings. Aaron and Miriam are talking about the woman that Moses took as his bride. In other words, Aaron and Miriam are gossiping about their sibling, and Miriam is afflicted with leprosy because of it. Ultimately, it's Moses that intercedes on her behalf, and she is healed. But in the midst of all that, the text tells us that Moses was the most humble man in all of the land. Now think of this for a second. The human being that probably had the most reason for hubris, for arrogance, to be a little bit haughty, was the one who the text goes out of its way to describe to us as the most humble. Counterintuitive. But let's look for a moment at the message that we're trying to be sent. Think about it for a second. Moses is probably the greatest leader that the children of Israel ever had. Lo kam b'Yisrael k'Moshe od Navi. There would be no other prophet that would rise like Moses. And yet, the single person in our history who had the greatest reason for haughtiness was one of the most humble. It sort of tells us that our humility must begin at the level of Moses's and only rise. Because we could never dream of being at Moses's level, so our humility must be greater. It's a reminder that our leaders, the people in positions of authority, must be able to govern with the utmost humility. Otherwise, their governing will be impure, tainted, and sometimes even criminal. I can only hope that as we read this week's Torah portion, that the elected officials of our beloved nation are reading as well. I can only hope that they see the lesson of Moses' humility as a directive, as a missive, as a charge, a challenge, an absolute necessity for them to channel a little bit of that humility and to understand that they are there but only for the will of the people. And their responsibility is not in any way to themselves, but to carry out what the people want. Shabbat Shalom.